Adriana, welcome to Money Moves for Latinas. You're such an inspiration to all of us Latinas. You're first generation Mexican American. You have actually made bold money moves. You were able to walk away from a toxic job. You have a master's degree, an MBA, and you've dealt with student loans, and you've
Yes.
experienced a layoff. And you're a co-author of a book, Latinas in Finances.
Yes, thank you. As I do like interviews and things like that, and you guys listen, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have done a lot because I'm sure you have also probably like experienced imposter syndrome, and you're just like, oh, but who am I or whatever, and then you're just like, oh my gosh, what have I done?
You're incredible. You've accomplished a
Thank
lot of
you.
things. Yeah. You're
Thank
actually
you.
the founder and the financial educator, the founder and jefa of Adriana Talks Dinero. What made you start that? What made you start your financial freedom journey and Adriana Talks Dinero?
Yeah, so my financial freedom journey kind of started once I was I was done with my bachelor's degree, and then I was going into starting to do like the MBA program pre stuff. I'm starting to see like since the pandemic happened, there aren't as many regulations in order to get into grad school for a business student. So when I was going to go ahead and go into a program, I actually ended up taking a little bit of time off after I graduated with my bachelor's, and I did the GMAT sort of prep. And what a GMAT is, it's kind of like an exam that tells a graduate school that you're ready to get into business school. Very much like med school and, legal programs and things like that. They've kind of gotten away from that, which I'm so happy for because I'm a horrible test taker. So I had to take that exam twice. And of course, it's like a money investment, right? And you're not even in the program. But I said from like there on out, I was starting to surround myself and starting to find people on social media that was talking about like a financial freedom journey. And I'm like, well, what the heck is that? So I started doing my research and, started listening to podcasts and following them on Instagram and things like that. And from that point on, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and live like within the salary that I'm making. And of course, when you first get out of college, right? Like you're making pennies, right? Compared as like you start growing and through your career. So I was probably making like $36,000 at that time. And I still had my car from high school, and I'm like, I'm gonna drive this thing till the wheels fall off. I'm gonna pay off all my credit card debt because I will go ahead and admit I'm an ex-shopaholic, and also, try to put myself through school as much as I could. I still had to take out student loans, and I'm actually still paying those back, but nonetheless, I have a plan to go ahead and pay those back. But essentially, it's kind of been instilled in me since I was young. My parents always said, like, you have to be independent just in case something were to happen. You lose a job, you get married and the marriage doesn't work out, or your husband passes away, or what have you. Like, you have to have a means to make money. So essentially, that's kind of like where it started. I always said, you know what? Being in the HR background, you see everything on the other side as you're hiring people and all the things. And, kind of in that space, because I'm first gen, everyone else in my family has always kind of just had a job, not so much a career, or they might have gone to school, but they never went, through that career path, like in corporate America. So I started learning from my white counterparts, like what a pay negotiation is and things like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start learning as much as I can. And as I learn, I go ahead and I spread it with everybody else too.
That's amazing. This is something like hushy hush. Like I never learned about all this. It was just like, well, go to school. Like my mom, I grew up with a single mom, so it's like, okay, get good grades. Okay, mom, I got good grades. Then I got a
Yes.
Hispanic scholarship fund that paid me by 4 years of nursing school. Got a bachelor's degree. I mean, it was just like, and then you get into the field and you start working, and it's just like, it was a lot of work. I got burnt. I've done it for 12 years and then got super burnt out from working in the hospital, the 12-hour shifts and all that.
I
So
can
blesses
imagine.
to all the nurses. And I heard you on another podcast that you were about to study nursing.
My
And I'm like,
dad, yeah,
yes.
my
I
dad
was like,
was,
she's smarter than me. She knew.
yeah.
I had no concept of what it entailed and how, yeah,
Many of us don't, right? I'm sure.
it was just like, I was just thrown 18 years old.
Yes.
You have to choose what you got to study, and you have
Yes.
4 years, and choose it now. And I was like, oh my
Yes.
God, I had never met a nurse. I didn't know what working 12-hour shifts, which is more like a 13-hour shift and with only a 30-minute break. And then when you're on break, the doctors bust in and they're like, con la lechuga en la cara, you're like, oh, yes, how can I help you? And you better not forget the orders. You know, it's just like, oh my gosh, it was just non-constant. I would find myself in the bathroom sometimes crying. I was like, I can't do this for the next 40 years.
I believe you. I know. And that's like something that I say to myself, right? And that's kind of like why I went through the financial journey. Like, even though I didn't go into nursing, and, you know, with you talking about
You're smarter than me.
Well, it wasn't so much that I was smarter. My dad pushed me towards it, and I luckily had a program at my high school that you did the CNA program, which is Certified Nursing Assistant, which is not nursing, but they have a lot of tough work, right? And I remember doing the program, and everyone in like the classroom was like excited about anatomy and all these things. And I'm like, I don't care about this stuff. And then we did like our clinical hours in order to get our certificate. And we did the clinicals. I wasn't happy. I'm like, I have to wake up at the crack of dawn to do this just for clinical hours. And then I have to wake up for the crack of dawn in order to do a shift because, like you said, they're 12-hour shifts. And I remember when I took the test, I did everything, right? My dad paid for everything. It was like $300 back then. It was like 2006. And I remember giving my dad my certificate when it came back from the state of Illinois. And I said, then papi, like, this is yours. And he's like, what do you mean this is mine? I said, you wanted me to go to nursing school. You wanted me to do the nursing program. I don't want this. And I said, I tried it. I didn't like it. I can give, you know, two pretty much on how like the body works. Like that's just me personally. And this just isn't my joy and I'm not going to do this. And he was pissed off. He was so upset and he's like, you just wasted a whole year. And, you know, I spent $300 on this. And I said, look, papi, better that I wasted 1 year. Well, 2 semesters of high school, which was like an hour-long class.
Than blindly walking into the class.
Or him, like, you know, trying to help me pay for school or me getting into a ton of debt for nursing school. And I said, this is a blessing in disguise. I'm like, I'm going to go into business. So,
I love that.
You know, it was like, and, you know, I look back at it now and I'm like, I'm glad that it happened that way because especially now being an adult and, you know, my dad and I clash quite a bit. But from there on, from like 16, 17-year-old me, I started to learn how to stand up for myself and not try to be that perfect daughter for my parents.
People pleasing you.
Yes. And start kind of growing from there. So, you know, everything happens for a reason. But like you just said, like my hat's off to nurses whenever I'm in a hospital or what have you. Like I am always the sweetest thing. And I'm like, I'm not here to cause more problems. Whenever you get to it, it's fine. Like I get it. You know, bless you for choosing this because I can't.
I've had shifts, like, it was so bad, like, right before I quit, you know, I had student loans and I could not quit. I was ready, but, you know, I did it for so long, and the average of nurses that stay working full-time, it's 7 years. I had already been at it 12 years, and I was like, you know, and there were some nurses that were there, like, oh, we're waiting until we turn 67, and they were like 63, 64, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm here 29 years old. I cannot be doing this in my 40s, in my 30s, in my 50s. Like, no, they were like, their back hurt, you know, and I was just like, I cannot, I need to find something else. But I was like, you know what, I owe money. So this is what I started on my financial freedom journey. I was like, I need to get my money right because I am walking one day. I'm walking out of this hospital and I'm never coming back ever.
Good for you.
But some of the shifts, you know, I was alone. Like on the weekends, we would call it skeleton shifts.
Yes.
Because on Saturday, you know, it was just like registered nurse system. Sometimes we didn't have CNAs. So it was just you on your hallway and then figure it out. Get the vitals, get the medicines, get the bed sheets clean, get them out of the bathroom. You know, it's just... No. And God forbid if one of your patients fell, you know, it's like more work on you and paperwork and, you know, it's just like... It was a lot. I you know, I tried to do it for as long as I could, but as soon as I paid off, you know, I'm on a financial freedom. As soon as I paid off what I owed, I was like, see you guys. You know?
Yes.
So this is what led me to starting Budget Save on blog and all that. But I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
So what is your best financial advice for Latinas?
For one is negotiate. Like I mentioned before, like I didn't know how to go about that. And I feel like so many of us always hear because I'm currently in corporate America. And I hear so many times ever since I started in human resources, qué bendecida eres que estás en una oficina, right? How blessed are you that you're in an office? Because I used to work in manufacturing a lot. So they would work out in a hot factory, doing like hard labor and things like that. And there were many times where I wanted to be sassy and kind of say something back. But I'm like, no, let me bite my tongue. I get where they're coming from, right? They come to this country for a better opportunity, but yet they're still doing labor jobs. Or when you get to know a lot of the employees who are in manufacturing or distribution and they're from other countries, like they will go ahead and open their hearts up to you. And learning that they were accountants and teachers and all these professionals in their home countries. And then they had to come here for a better opportunity. And it is this labor intensive work that no one here wants to do. And so you sympathize with it and you understand it's coming from a place of hurt. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to take it offensively. But at the same time, I kind of like to say it like, yes, in a sense, you're blessed to have that job, but you deserve to be in that job. And I feel like so many of us don't feel that way when regards of like imposter syndrome and in regards of being the only one that looks like you in the room. Like I'm the only Latina at my corporate level. And, you know, it's a big load to carry, but also I'm very empathetic with all my employees and with all of my people in leadership. And you have to ask for the highest price possible. You know, I always say, like, I do pay negotiation workshops, or I will also work with individuals who need to go look for another job and they're like, Adriana, help me with my resume and pay negotiation. So I also offer that now because I'm on the other side of the table. I can tell you, like, if the policy says you only get 2 weeks of vacation time, that's a lie. Negotiate it. Negotiate it that you get an extra week if that's something that's important to you. Or if you want your insurance to start early. Or if you want remote work or hybrid work. Like, they chose you for a reason. I feel like so many times what I see and what I hear, especially for Latinas, is I'm scared to negotiate because they're going to take the job away from me. No, mujer, like they picked you for a reason and they're going to go ahead and give you what you want because they want you for whatever reason that is. If it's your experience, if it's because you're bilingual, if it's because you're educated, whatever it is. They want you and you asking for 10 grand more or for you asking for extra shares and stocks in the company if it is a publicly owned company.
I didn't even know that was something they can even ask for. Goodness.
Yeah, or like a stipend for like traveling to work. Like I'm in the suburbs of Chicago. So like let's say I end up getting a job in, you know, downtown Chicago, which we call the Loop, where I'm like, okay, I have to jump on the train or I have to drive in. I'm like, hey, can you give me a stipend to pay for my MetroCard, which is the train system that comes from the suburbs to the city? You know, can we get that into my payroll and then I'll go ahead and I'll take the job. So there's things that you can negotiate that a lot of people don't think about. So it's to be creative and to understand what you really want. Actually, my dad wasn't too happy when I got this most recent job. I actually found it through a recruiter. And that's another tip that I always tell people. Like, if you're looking for a job, go to the recruiters because they always go, like, they get the first jobs. Like me, I have so much that I have going on. I'm regional, so I have 2 different regions within the United States. I don't have the time to go scout for people. So I actually contract recruiters to go look for people for me for these roles. And they know exactly how much I'm paying for those roles. And if you yourself get a good recruiter to help you find a job, what I did is I asked my recruiter, when she actually ended up finding me, I wasn't working with her. And I asked her, I said, what's the top amount that they're willing to pay? And she gave me the number. So I asked for that and they gave it to me on the spot. And I said, you know what? I just feel like negotiating something. I said, can I get an extra week of vacation time? They're like, absolutely. In 2 minutes, they sent me over the new offer letter with the more vacation time. And I told my dad and he's like, mija, ¿cómo puedes, right? How can you? Ya te ves como huevona, that you look like you're lazy because you want more time off. I said, no, papi. I said, I took all the money that I could on the table, and vacation time and rest for me is very important. So I'm going to put that as my priority. So I'm going to ask for more vacation time. The worst they can say is no. And he's like, estás loca, right? Like, you're crazy. Like, how are you going to ask that? But it's because our parents never had the opportunity to do so, nor did they know how to. So it's understanding how to do all of that, and of course always have it in writing. So always do this negotiation over emails, because you're always going to need it in writing. In my world, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So you always want that in writing too.
I love it. So doing it by email. I love it. That's awesome. Those are great tips. And it's something that no one talks about. Like no one taught me that. It's like, oh, get a job after you graduate. Okay, let me get a job. And it's like the first one that could hire me. And I was there so loyal for so many years. I never job hopped. And I do hear that a lot in personal finance, to job hop and increase your pay and negotiate. I never did any of that, But that is something that, no one talks about it. So I'm so excited you're out there, speaking for yourself and like learning to give yourself more valuable, because that's actually one of the biggest struggles for Latinas in the workplace, is knowing their worth and confidently asking for more money.
Exactly.
Like you mentioned, a lot of us were raised to be grateful, to just, to be grateful for what we get and not to rock the boat or ask for more. But the reality is that a lot of Latinas are underpaid.
Yes. Absolutely. We are the lowest paid individuals in the workforce. And I see it a lot, as I do like pay assessments and things like that. It's always trying to like vouch for them, like on the back end. Like they don't know what's going on, right? But it's always vouching for them. Or even too, like what I do a lot, like within my regions, if I see there's like a shining star and I'm like, why are they in this position? They need to be a little bit higher. I will push and I will push. And I said, look, I don't know what everyone else is telling you, but I'm telling you from a human aspect or even a professional aspect, like you deserve to be in this role. And you better apply for it once it comes up. And I'll send them like an IM, be like, FY, and I like send the link, FYI, this opened up. I better see your application in there as I'm interviewing. And it has happened. And
that's awesome.
It is. I even had a conversation with someone in leadership on my team. And when I first started, since I'm like in a business partner, so very much like a managerial role in human resources, when I came in, there was only one woman like on the managerial leadership. And now I am at 4 women in my region, and one being a minority woman. So I'm like, we're getting there. So it really does matter, like when you have someone that looks like you, or someone that you're like, oh, there she is, or there's another Latina that's doing the damn thing. Like, I can do it too. And I've heard it. And I'm like, they're like, you know what? We see you in this space, and it just kind of makes us feel like it is attainable. And I'm like, hell yeah, it's attainable. Like, keep on going. Like, there is nothing that can stop you. So, seeing those sorts of transformation, only being there for like 2 years, it's so beautiful to see. And, it's us taking up space as well, right? Like, don't play small. Don't be small. Like, whatever your goals are, like, go for it. And like I always say, like, apply for the job and things like that, because the worst they can say is no. And unfortunately, like statistically, and I see this so many times, for whatever reason, women only apply for jobs when they feel like they match 100% of the job description. Do it when you can match 60%. And a lot of people are like, but why if I don't even know like 40% of the role? And in an HR standpoint, I don't want someone who has done this for like X amount of years. I want someone who is still excited and who wants to grow and wants to thrive and is okay with messing up. Because many times if I hire someone who is 100%, with the job description, they get bored real quick and they're going to go find the next shiny thing. If I get someone who's within 60 to 70% of knowing the role, but I see that they have the drive, the motivation, and the stamina to go ahead and grow into everything that's in that job description, then I can go ahead and work with that. And I know they're going to be here for quite a while because it's going to be a challenge. And if they thrive on that, like, even better. It's negotiating that pay and applying for jobs that even if you don't think that you're quote unquote good enough, because all of us are good enough for that, but if you match 60% of it, like, go apply for it.
That's amazing. I love it. I did see that you've created a course called Sin Pena, Latina's Guide to Confident Salary Negotiation. Can you share with us, why did you feel the need for this course and how has it helped Latinas secure higher pay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I created that course because I have heard over and over that no one knows how to negotiate their pay. So that is like broken down step by step. Like there are worksheets attached. I tell you how to do your market value evaluation. Essentially, that just means with your skill set, your education level, your years of experience, and, you know, within the industry and area that you live in, how much you're supposed to make in that role. There are scripts involved. Like if you are negotiating pay as you are a person in this current role, like let's say you take my course and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting paid like $10,000 less than what I'm supposed to from what the data says. You have all the scripting there on how that conversation is supposed to go with your manager. And then, like, let's say they're like, I'm looking for a new job and I'm going to do the data analysis for that. It also has all the scripting in there on how to ask for your pay raise or to negotiate that pay in that new role as well. And also like tips and tricks on like what you can negotiate on. I did a little bit on things that you can negotiate on when you're getting laid off, because I've been laid off and I actually negotiated my severance package, but I also negotiated everyone else's severance package too, which they don't, well, if they've heard podcast episodes now they know, but they don't know that I did that on the back end because I knew how detrimental a layoff was going to be. And I tried to get every single penny that I could for my population because we were all going to be out of a job at some point.
Love that. Wow, I love that you can advocate for yourself and you're thinking of ahead of the game. You're 2-3 steps ahead, about the layoff. I love that. I did pull out some statistics, so I'm going to read them to you. I did go on Google. I was like, how much is Latina women getting paid? So, like, I'm going to read you exactly what I found, what Google's going to tell us.
Yes.
But it says that research says that Latina women in the United States face significant wage gap compared to non-Hispanic white males. In 2023, Latinas working full-time earned only 58 cents for every dollar earned by a white male, white non-Hispanic men. So there is definitely a disparity there.
Yeah.
Between, it's the same role, same everything. And then the Google actually said that over a 40-year career, this wage gap results in a Latinas earning on average 1.3 million less than a non-Hispanic men. Like, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot. Like, imagine like what we can do with like $1.3 million, right? Like, you can get to like financial freedom that much quicker. You can save for retirement. Absolutely. You can send the kids off to college, all the things. And when you look at the little piece of it, you're like, oh, maybe it's not that big. And then you look at the big picture of it and you're like, that's really big. Yeah. So it's super important to advocate for yourself. Even though it's a scary thing, it's a very taboo thing, unknown thing in our culture, but it's something to go ahead and start getting comfortable with. Like I always say, like with your reviews and things like that, you better go in bragging about yourself. And that's something that like we're not comfortable with, and saying, I'm really good at this, I'm really good at that, I'm really good at this. And it's like, you have to, like, you're an amazing human being with amazing skills and you've done wonderful things throughout the year. Brag about it, like celebrate about it, because if you don't, then who the heck will?
That's right. You just gotta be your own spokesperson and just kind of like learn to negotiate. And if they don't know how, they can definitely check out your course.
Yes.
Link it in the show notes so they can follow you on social media. Adriana Talks Dinero. She's got you. So whoever's listening and wants to like get more money, $10,000 is a huge difference. Like for doing the same entire job and getting paid $10,000 over the span of a year, like that's a lot more money, that's in your pockets. That's gonna definitely help you pay off debt faster, pay off student loan, like you mentioned. Yeah, absolutely. And then research also mentioned that Latinas who are in managerial positions, or like managed Latinas, they usually earn about $58,000 a year versus non-Hispanic white males. They are earning about $91,000 for the same exact type of managerial job, which is a 36% wage gap. So what are your thoughts on that?
That is crazy. When you said 58,000, I'm like, in a managerial position, right? Because I know the numbers, like, being in HR, that's much too low. Like, if you're listening to this and you're within that range, like, honey, you need to reach out. If it's not me, somebody else, about pay negotiation, because they are putting you in a really bad spot. And it's just one of those things, like, those numbers are legitimate. Like, I have several managerial individuals who are either close to six figures or making the six figures. And it is possible. And I think that a lot of us think like six figures is such a huge number, right? Because our parents never made that much money and things like that. I remember as my dad, he retired early because he kind of did his own like financial freedom journey to retire early.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so he retired as a master mechanic from Ford, and I was just getting into a role, and I was making more money than he was at like, how old was I? I was like 29, and he was already like, in his late 50s. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm making more money than my dad does, like, straight time if he doesn't work overtime. And that's huge. And, like, you have a little bit of guilt as, a first gen child. But that also kind of gives you motivation of, like, no, like, take this as a sign, like, that you're going down the right path. But you go ahead and you help everyone else or show everyone else that the possibility is there as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I love that. That is such a good money move that you've made. You're like, I love that you've made these bold money moves, like speaking up for yourself and like asking for more, demanding, not demanding, but like negotiating one more extra week at work. That's something that you don't even think about. You're like, like we're so used to like, okay, yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'm so grateful to have this job. You don't think of these things. So I love that. I love it.
Yes.
So a lot of Latinas listening right now believe they need to increase their income before they actually start tackling their debts. However, I believe you can actually get out of debt with your current income. What are your thoughts on this?
So I agree with you, right? I always think it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And that's with any money goal, right? If you're paying off debt, or if you're saving up for a house, or if you're investing for early retirement. It is a marathon. It is baby steps. Now, you can't expect yourself to pay off all your debt in 1 year. I mean, it could be possible, right? If you do side hustles and, really start cutting. At the end of the day, too, is, especially with the inflation that's going on and things like that, you also have to go ahead and see if you are getting paid sufficiently, right? If you're, back to that statistic that you just said, if you're a manager somewhere and you're making $58,000, yes, use that, whatever money you have to go ahead and pay off the debt within your budget and within your numbers, but also make sure to make it a point that you're also making the correct amount of money. Because too, what I see a lot of times is people end up getting these higher and higher salaries and then they inflate their lifestyle. So, before they were driving a Honda and now all of a sudden they're driving a Mercedes. And, that sort of thing gets you in a lot of trouble too. And I think within paying off debt, you also have to look like deep inside to see the reason why you ended up there in the first place. It's a lot of psychological, it's a lot of inner work and things like that, that no matter what salary that you make, you have to do regardless in order to go ahead and pay off that debt.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of Latinas like us, we struggle. We struggle with debt, whether it's credit cards, student loans, or car payments. What are the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to pay off debt?
The big thing that I see is, like, let's say that they have 5 credit cards, right? And they start paying them off and they start getting excited, and now they're starting to send you letters for like 0% financing and stuff. So they start charging those cards again and they fall into that same trap. And then all of a sudden we're back to to where we started at. So it's understanding what got you there. And if you're going to make a plan to go ahead and pay it off, we are going to keep it paid off. There are strategies that you can use for like balance transfers and things like that, but you have to still make it a goal that you're going to pay it off at the end of the day. So I think that's kind of the big thing I see a lot of people do. If it's, that example, or they do like debt consolidation or bankruptcy and things like that, they're not doing that inner work to really see how did we get here to begin with, especially when it's credit card debt. Student loans is a little different, right? But nonetheless, it's just understanding those triggers, the actions, the emotions around spending that got you to that in the first place.
And a lot of us Latinas, we love to shop. We love to shop online, convenience. We love to, like, nobody likes to be on a budget or feel like, oh, you can't afford that or you can't afford all these things. So a lot of us, we're underpaid and we like nice things,
Yes.
Nobody wants to be looking a little raggedy. But, we like Sephora and little high end things. So it's like there comes to a balance, like, because I always mention in the podcast, paying for things using credit cards feel like, oh, there's no limit. You buy as many as you want to, oh, I'll pay it later. That's what a lot of the Latinas who are listening struggle with. Like, oh, I'll get it later. I'll pay it with the next paycheck. I'll go ahead and book that vacation for this summer coming up. And I'll just figure out how I'm going to be paying that $3,000 vacation, maybe for the bonus in December. But they just kind of keep rolling and just they don't want to do the hard work like you said. They don't want to do the inner work, like, okay, why are we relying on credit cards? Why are we spending the way we're spending? Are we stressed out? Like they just don't want to sit down to do those things. They're too busy. They have kids as well, so it's like, what are your thoughts on that, or what advice do you have for them?
For one, I would say, if you can, like, find a money coach or a financial coach, we see these sorts of things all the time. And I want to say, like, 98% of the time, a lot of times it is some sort of emotional spending or some sort of wound that we're trying to heal. Or one question, if you ever are my client, the one question that I'm going to ask is, what is your most earliest memory of money? And that's a big one. And for some people, it's very triggering because a lot of us have grown up in a state of just survival mode, right? Where we didn't have enough. And we carry that with us for the rest of our lives until we do that work. See if maybe your job has an employee assistant program, which essentially can go ahead and help with counseling, where they'll give you like X amount of free therapy sessions with a therapist to start working on that. They're the ones that know all about psychology and understanding how to heal those traumas and things like that. So that's a free way to go ahead and do it. And you can go ahead and they usually end up having like this whole list of therapists. And if you're looking for a queer therapist, if you're looking for a therapist that has more of a Christian lens, a therapist who is a Latina, or someone who's Black, or what have you, right? More radical thinking. I was having a conversation this past weekend with my girlfriends. We were talking about therapists, and find your person that's going to help you heal and whatever that fits for you. So look into the EAP program and see how that can help you too, just so you can start healing those wounds. And once you start understanding what triggers your spending and you start really healing those money traumas, it makes the journey so much easier.
I feel like it's the hardest step is to start to face your numbers. Let's do this. Let's see how deep in the hole we are, how much credit card debt we actually have racked up, and let's deal with it. It's a little bit. Sometimes I feel like a lot of Latinas want to bury their head in the sand and ignore it and be like, oh, I'll get married and then my husband will help me pay that off, or I'll eventually have a landful of money and then or when I pay taxes, I'll get some money back. And, it's just like they just keep putting it off and not really take a few minutes. I know it's very uncomfortable to look at the numbers, and if you're a single parent, or if you're just a single income family, it's hard, but it can be done. It's just eye-opening too. And we all made money mistakes. We all have racked up debt, but it's just, it helps you to see where you're coming from, where you're starting.
Absolutely.
So my next question for you, if someone feels really overwhelmed and doesn't know where to start, what would be their first step they should take to begin their debt-free journey?
So the one exercise I think that's super important is print out all of your bank statements, your credit card statements, and all those things, and start seeing where your spending is going. And it's essentially like an exercise. You're going to take like 3 highlighter colors. You're going to do one on those necessity things that you need to live by, right? Like the rent, the groceries, the electricity, and things like that. And then you're going to do the next one for debt and savings. You're going to do that in a separate color. And then that last color is really going to be the one that you don't really need those things to survive. And what I mean by is those Sephora runs, the Target runs, going out to eat fast food because you didn't pre-plan your meals ahead of time. And that is really going to give you a good sense, and it is going to give you a good idea on where your money is going. I wholeheartedly believe in the zero-based budget, which
I
it
love
sounds
that.
scary. It sounds scary, right? We were like, zero-based budget, what is that? But essentially, all it means is that every single dollar that comes in has a job to do something. I don't care if it's to pay the mortgage. I don't care if it's to pay for the dog food or the cat litter or to start paying off debt. Like, you have to make a plan for every single dollar that's coming in to do something and to have a job to pay something off or to save towards something. And I always tell my clients when they go through that exercise, like, be in a state of mind where you are going to be forgiving of yourself because you're really going to see the mistakes that you made with your money. And just understand that that was you before this exercise, and who you're going to be after this exercise is who we're going to go ahead and plan to be, because people get sick to their stomachs, people start getting, pissed off at themselves, people start crying because they're like, I spent $3,000 on shopping and I can't even tell you what the heck I bought. And that happens. But also, it's understanding the black and whiteness of what did you spend that money on, right? That it's in typing, it's in writing somewhere, it's printed out on that. And it's that reality, which so many people don't even want to face, because how many people have you probably heard as well that they have the credit cards and the credit card statements and the bills and the creditor like envelopes all stacked like on the kitchen table or in the junk drawer in the kitchen or on the coffee table, because they're scared to open it because they don't want to know the reality of it. And they're just like, I had just have everything on minimum payment anyway, so it is what it is. And it's like, no, like, you have to take that first step of reality in order to start moving forward.
I love it. I love it. And that's the most uncomfortable one. But once you do it, it's freeing as well. Be like, okay, my number is X or $78,000 or $85,000, but let's move forward and let's just have a plan. I love it. Yeah, it's just, we can't be shoving those envelopes or those, credit card payments, and a lot of people don't look at their credit card statement. They're like, oh yeah, next time I get paid, I'm gonna go ahead and pay the balance on it, and then it's like something happens or a car tire happens, they don't have an emergency fund, and it's like, well, let me just charge it on the credit card. Oh, the car needed new battery or the car needed new brakes, and it's like, well, I don't have money.
Or the kid broke his leg and you're like, oh, well, now I can't pay it off because I have to pay the deductible on that.
So there's a lot of things that come up that will definitely kick you off the journey, or if you're about to start it. How would you deal with that? Like, you start and then it's like you go 1 foot forward and then 3 backwards. What mindset shifts would you suggest for anybody starting off from their debt-free dream or dealing with debt?
So, you brought up a really good point, right? Having that emergency fund. I like to call it a peace of mind fund because sometimes people are like, emergency fund, it freaks them out. So, name it something, whatever it is. Some people call it a FU fund, whatever speaks to your heart. But I always tell people, like, at least try to put a little bit in there. I don't care if it's $2 a week. I don't care if it's $5 a week. Because like you just said, it's not if something happens, it's when something happens. And, life is so unpredictable. You gave really good examples, like in regards to a car or someone gets sick or something happens to your house and you need to pull that money from somewhere. It's always nice to go ahead and have a little nest egg of something. And, statistically, like, I want to say, and this might be the wrong statistic, but it's, around these numbers, it's like about 70 to 80% of Americans can't even cover the $300 emergency. Right?
Yeah, I've heard
and
it.
It's so it's like, at least start working towards something, and it's better to have something in there than nothing. So, start making a plan so you do have that, or start looking, for example, like for medical things. I do this with my cat and dog all the time. There's something called care credit, and you can use it for medical expenses for yourself as a human or for your fur babies.
Love that.
And I have pet insurance on the both of them. And these claims take forever to go through. If they get sick or, something happens, I have to take them to the vet. Just took the cat last month and I just checked on it and the claim is still pending and we're almost a month out from the appointment. So I have it on that Care credit card and 0% interest for 6 months. So look for those sorts of things too, so you're not putting it on a high interest credit card. See, what payment plans are available for you. Sometimes you'll end up like if you have car issues and you're a loyal customer to the auto shop, you're like, hey, I've fallen on hard times, like, can you help me out? Do we have a payment plan, or do you know of a credit card, or have an affiliation with some sort of financial service to have very low interest or zero interest? If you fall into hard times due to medical, like a lot of people don't know that the hospitals and a lot of these big medical facilities do have programs to go ahead and help individuals out who are low income or that can't afford their medical bills, to get them covered, if not 100%, at least a little bit, or to at least go on a payment plan with zero interest. You let them know, like, hey, I can only afford $20 a month. What can you do for me? And they'll go ahead and walk you through the program. So that way you don't have to put it on a credit card. Like, see what's available to you. See what sort of organizations in your community can also help out. Me being from the Chicagoland area, there's a ton of organizations for the minority groups, for the immigrant groups as well, that do provide financial assistance for those sorts of things. So go ahead and see how you can go ahead and take advantage of those sorts of things. If you are one of those individuals who are living paycheck to paycheck or who are in over your head in debt, but you have to go have this surgery, or the kid broke their leg, or your dog is sick. And I understand, like, our fur babies are like our human children at some point too. So look at those programs or lines of credit or credit cards that are available to you. Don't be shameful to go ahead and ask for it either. That's what those programs are there for.
A lot of things that I've dealt with, or like a lot of the students who I've taught, a lot of Latinas that I'm teaching about money and helping them, they don't even understand how interest rate works here in this country, because a lot of them like have come from Venezuela, or if they're just getting their paper now, and then they're like, oh, I need a brand new car. Like one of my friends, I'm translating, I'm going to the bank with her, translating. Mm-hmm. And they're offering like her credit score. She doesn't even understand what a credit score is or how interest rates works in this country, because she just moved here about a year ago. She got her papers, her DC DACA, or like she can legally buy things, and she has a job. And it was just like I was like, oh my gosh, let me just kind of break this down for you, because what we went together, her credit score, she's newbie, she hasn't been here a year or maybe a year and a half. She's been working for 6 months, so she would get a car loan. But when we went and they offer the car loan and the interest rates, I almost fell on the floor. I was like, do not sign that. Like what they were offering were like 14.99% for a car loan, or 12.99 because her credit score was 620. And then the guy literally said you have to have a credit score of 750 or higher to be able to get the 4.99 promotion that we have at the bank, and she was like, oh my god, I'd rather have a 4.99. Like I explained that she was ready to sign, she's like, oh yeah, I need the car, how much am I approved for? And I was like, whoa, let's wait a minute, let's just, so a lot of Latinas are not, they're just come here, they don't know what they're signing. I was translating and I'm like, we're not signing anything. She's like, well, why not? I need a car. And I was like, let's just think about it. You're about to sign a lease for 5 years at I think it was 12.99. I don't know exactly, but it was a double digit interest rates. And she was like, yeah, I'm fine with that. And I was just like, no, that's not how we work. And she was approved for $30,000. I'm like, ooh, 12%, like the math is not mathing here. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them just like, when he gets the bank statement, he makes the last payment, it shows you like you bought it for $22,000 but you paid $37,000. He's like, how did I pay $37,000? And I was like, oh, no one educated you on this? And he's like, no, I just needed a car and I thought this was cool, and I signed here and I signed there. So these are the Latinas that are in my community that are just migrating here, don't speak the language, but they need a car. What are your consejos? What are your thoughts for them?
For that one, especially find someone like you, or anybody that like understands interest, or go on YouTube and try to find someone that's going to explain it to you, right? There's interest calculators out there and things like that. Like look into that. And as you're talking, it reminds me so much of like when I was still in college. I worked retail. And I'll never forget, I was working in retail and one of the girls was just graduating college to be a teacher. And she got this brand new Jeep. Like, it was an expensive Jeep. I didn't ask how much, but I kind of put in my head, like, how much it was. And I asked her, I'm like, why did you get a new Jeep if you don't even have a teaching job yet? And she's like, I deserve it. And I just kind of like sat there and I'm like, you don't have like, a 9 to 5 job. You're still working retail with me. And she just said, like, I deserved it. And that's why I bought the car, because I graduated from college. But it's like the college loans are going to kick in at some point.
Right.
You know just as well as I do, when we get our first job out of college, it's not going to pay that much of a good money. And it's like, I don't know how much you got the interest rate on it for or anything like that. But we also have to take a step back and say, can we afford this? Right?
I like that.
You don't have to get the nicest car. It's okay to get a used car. Or it's okay to get a car, like save up your money. Let's say like, I mean, now it's really hard to find a car for like $5,000, but maybe like 10 grand, right? And you get like a decent car that can take you from point A to point B until you can build up that credit, or until you can have that nice down payment, or what have you. There's nothing wrong with driving a car till the wheels fall off. I do that for myself. And, like I always say, I now have a Hyundai Tucson. I'm like, I'm going to drive that baby till the wheels fall off. Like, that's it. Like, for me, but that takes a lot of healing, too. For someone to say, the type of car that I drive doesn't define me. The type of house that I live in doesn't define me. The purse that I carry doesn't define me. And I think that's a lot of things that we also, carry with us as we immigrate to this country, or we're children of immigrants. Yeah. Because it's crazy. Like, even this past time when I went to Mexico, and I just got back about a week ago now, and they know brand names like Gucci and Balenciaga and Chanel. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you know this stuff if it's really hard for you to even, buy a pair of Nike shoes? But it's because what they see on social media. Oh, okay. And it's what they see everywhere else. And it's just like, if you see that, at your home country, and then you come over here and maybe you think it's normal, and it's like, no, like, you don't have to have the Gucci purse in order to say that you made it. Like, the term silent millionaire, like, is very tight and true, right? Like, if you pull up at the red light and you see someone in a Toyota Corolla, who knows if that person has like 7 figures sitting in their investment account, because they're sitting in a Toyota Corolla from like 2005. And instead of putting all that money towards car payments, they're putting it towards their investing account. So it's kind of understanding, like, what are your ultimate goals? Educating yourself around what does interest rate look like, or maybe kind of taking that step back and saying, you know what? Yes, I would love to have a brand new SUV, but this might not be the season for it. Let me go ahead and at least save some money to get something that's older, or maybe get a used car instead of a brand new car, right? You have to look at the entire picture. Like, I'm the daughter of a mechanic, so I do, some of my own little maintenance things when I can, or two, like, I am very specific on where, like, I take my car. Like, here in the suburbs, not too far from here, at the next town over, there's actually a woman-owned auto shop that I take my car to. So, like, I trust them wholeheartedly. They, like, explain things to me and things like that. So it's finding, as you get your car as well, it's finding sort of that team behind you as well to help you maintain that car to the full life that you possibly can.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, I couldn't walk faster than out of that bank, that credit union that she was about to.
You're like pulling her. You're like, Mama,
I was pulling her, and I was like, let's get out of here. We're not ready for this. And she's like, but what do you mean? And I was like, then, we got home, and I was like, let me explain to you. You have to work on your credit. Once your credit, it's good, it's 745 or higher, you get a special interest rate, which is 4.55. So I had to explain that, and I was like, here's what they're offering you, $14.99 or $12.99. I don't remember exactly the numbers, because you're at 620, which it's totally normal for someone who just came in the country. It takes time, and it takes years of, we can work on that, and then I was like, let's just look at the bigger picture. You're asking for a $35,000 car loan, right? Because that's what they're going for right now. If you're buying something off the lot, you're asking for this, right? That's what you want. And I told her, and she's like, yeah, that's what I want. And I was like, okay, how much money are we bringing in a year? Are you making $35,000 a year? And then she just got back her taxes, and she's like, and I was like, let's look at what your W-2 is. And she's like, what is this number? And I was like, you're making $18,000 a year, and you're asking for a $35,000 car. Where's the math? And then she's like, oh, I didn't even know that. I thought I could afford the $500 payments. And I was just like, honey, you're making $18,000 a year and you're wanting to buy a 35,000 or a $32,000, $30,000 car. The math, I mean, you don't even make that in a year. Like, let's just not even, it's just, it took me a lot of reasoning. She had no idea. She was ready to sign, ready to agree to 14.99. She said, let's just drive off. And I was like, no, we're
And I
not doing
think,
that.
and that's the important thing that you just mentioned too, that a lot of people don't know. Like, I'm not a big fan of going to dealerships because I always end up negotiating and they hate me for that, which is cool, right? But at the end of the day, if you go in there, what's the first question that they ask you, Rachel? How much do you want to pay every month? And if you say $500, they're going to try to squeeze you into whatever loan that they can that you're going to go ahead and pay $500 a month.
Hey, oh, yeah.
If it's a 5 year, I've heard that there's like a 8 year now.
Wow.
Like, I can't imagine having a car loan for 8 years because that's almost like the whole longevity of the car, right?
Right.
Especially nowadays, they don't make them like they used to. And I think the big thing too is that people usually think, oh, I'm going to buy a car, so I'm just going to go in the dealership and then they're going to go ahead and run the numbers. Do your shopping around. Like, I'm a huge advocate of credit unions. I love them. I will like talk about them until my face turns blue. And they will always give you like the
Better.
best interest
Yeah.
rates possible. So do your shopping around too, like before you start getting in front of a sales guy, because they're gonna know how the tactics are and they're not really gonna be that helpful, unfortunately. And I think also the big thing is if you are looking to buy a car, try to do it towards the end of the year or towards the end of the month because they're trying to reach their numbers and it's a lot easier to negotiate with them then too.
Yep, I agree. And I feel like a lot of education with the, Latina community, like, hey, what interest rates are and all of this. And my husband is a realtor, so he actually gets the Spanish call. So there was a Cuban, guy no habla inglés. He's like, hey, sounds super excited. He's like, hey, I've been here in America for 7 years. I've worked 2 jobs. I mean, he sounded perfect. He's like, I worked 2 jobs. I am now ready to buy a house. I have enough money. I've been working. My credit score is this high, and he did say it.
Yeah.
It was a good credit score, and we were so excited. My husband was like, oh yeah, of course, let's just go, let me go ahead and send you off to my financial planning, to get financing in place, and then I'll get back to you. Sure, we'll see what you get financed. The guy had been working for so long, 2 jobs, and he was so excited. He was not approved. Like, my husband's heart was broken, and we were like, what happened? He has 2 jobs and he's been at it for 7 years. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
The guy had like over 14 credit cards all maxed out. So I was like, oh my gosh, like 7 to 10 or 12. I don't remember exactly the numbers, but he had a lot of credit card debt. So I was like, oh my gosh, so this is what's preventing a lot of the Hispanic communities to buying a house, because they work hard. That we're not afraid of working hard as a Hispanic. Like, we're so used to having 2 jobs, 2 full times, and getting home ownership is a big thing for a lot of Hispanics.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And it's like, what are your consejos? Or like someone like Mario was, that was a client. My husband was trying to help, but he wasn't approved. What would you tell someone like that that's like, okay, I worked 2 jobs and then the finances still don't, the math ain't mathing, to get the house?
Yeah, no, I think, back to that exercise of seeing where your numbers are at. Not only seeing what you're spending, but your net worth. And what I mean by net worth, see what your assets are, how much money you have in the bank, maybe properties that you have that are already paid off, or what your investment accounts look like, retirement accounts look like, and go ahead and put that against what your liabilities are. Liabilities is everything that you owe, right? That you don't own, that you still have some sort of payment towards, some sort of loan towards. That's going to be a big indicator. And I think as well, especially us as Latinos, we are like stuck on this idea of instant gratification. Lo queremos, pero ahorita.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I feel like before, I think like more in like my parents' generation, they would put like the money under the mattress for the things, right? I want those boots. I'm going to save my money for it. And they go ahead and save for it. And then, they would go to the tianguis and, buy their boots. And now it's just like, well, what do I have to wait for? I can just put on a credit card. And it's so easily accessible, but it's so easily accessible because that's a multi-billion-dollar company and they know exactly what sort of people they're selling those credit cards to, and they know the psychological part of it, and they're going to get you. That's why they're so successful. Imagine if we lived in, a country where, yes, that was available, but we didn't use it. They'd be pissed off and they'd try to go ahead and get us in different ways. But those financial institutions are in place to make money off of us in one way or another because we are a capitalistic society. So it's those things of that delayed gratification by saving the money, having a high yield savings account so you get the most amount of money in interest while your money's sitting there for whatever it is. And it's for you to make those goals using sinking funds and saying, hey, like I want to purchase, this purse. But you're not going to buy it today because you don't have the money for it. But let's go ahead and make a goal for you to save money for it. And then you can go ahead and buy it in cash or what have you, right? But you have the money for it. And it reminds me so much of when we were younger. My mom put us on the money envelope system. So every single week she'd go ahead and stuff our envelopes, right? And my brother and I had a $5 allowance. And he was a big video game junkie when we were growing up. And my mom's like, okay, Miko, like if you want that video game, you have to save your money, right? And back then, like the games were about like $50. So we had to wait 10 weeks before he can buy that video game. Here comes 10 weeks. And my mom be like, okay, Miko, like we can go ahead and go wherever.
That's awesome.
GameStop or whatever and go buy it. And this boy, he's like, I don't want that anymore. I waited so long to buy this game and I'm spending all this money on one thing. I don't want it anymore. So that's him as a little kid. And, that psychology kind of works on us too. It could get to the point where you saved all that money for that purse and then you're like looking at the money. Let's say it's a, $400 purse. And you're like, I worked hard for this. I saved a lot of time, like with this money, right? I don't want that anymore. It's not worth it anymore. So you'd be surprised on, what that could look like as you save for it or you wait for it. Very much like the exercise that they tell you, like when you're shopping, put it in your shopping cart, wait 48 hours, and if you still really want it, go ahead and buy it. But if you forgot about it, then that's something that you didn't even want in the first place.
That's true.
Yeah.
I love that. And I feel like that's not taught in school. That's not taught anywhere. As soon as you get your first paycheck from starting to work, and then you get your first credit card, it feels like fake money that you don't ever have to pay back. I feel like that was the mistake I did in my 20s. I was like, oh, I can get all these things. Oh, I can go on vacation. And the system is made that way. Or like the credit cards are actually advertised that way. So then they can make more money off of you because the longer you have a balance or the longer you're in debt, the more money the companies make.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Por golpetazos, how we just sort of like fumble and have to learn. So this is why I'm like, okay, we need to talk about these things. A lot of many first-gen Latinas feel pressure to help their families financially. How can we support our families without sabotaging our own financial future?
I think that has a lot to do with setting boundaries, which in our culture, that is not something that is up there on the totem pole. That's something that a lot of us are struggling with. I don't think there's anything wrong with you supporting your family or even trying to help. But if it's at your own expense, right? If it's kind of like the analogy, if it's to take food out of your own mouth, like all of the food out of your own mouth to feed others, that's kind of when you start, saying, I gotta cut that boundary. And, going back to the peace of mind account, let's say that you could be responsible for someone one day, if it is a parent or a grandparent or, a great aunt or uncle or what have you, right? Because they raised you or they helped raise you. Go ahead and make a savings account for them or put a bucket in your high yield savings account for them. And when those conversations come up, like let's say that someone gives me a call and they're like, Adriana, I'm in a tight bind. Can I borrow $1,000? I can easily say, Mira, like in all honesty, I don't have $1,000 right now to go ahead and borrow, but I do have a savings account for my family members and you're my family member. I only have $350. I can go ahead and let you borrow that or give it to you or what have you. So it's kind of saying that boundaries, like you don't have to give it all because What I've seen a lot of times, unfortunately, is that a lot of family members abuse it,
Mm.
where they'll go ahead and ask because they keep on getting put in these financial tight spots or these really uncomfortable financial spaces. And they never learn because they know that you're going to go ahead and get them out. So they will never correct their behavior. So sometimes you do need to reinforce that a little bit, right? Like, let's say that you have a mom that maybe once a quarter asks you for like $2,000, and now you can never, for the past 5 years you can't buy a house because mom keeps on asking for that money, and that's getting pulled out of the savings for the down payment of the house, and she doesn't pay you back. At what point do you say, okay, this woman's not learning her lesson and whatever that is, and she's just spending and spending, and sometimes you have to kind of cut that off, or you have to pull back a little bit and have that honest conversation, even though it hurts, and say, you know what, mom? Like, over the past 5 years, every 3 months, you give me a call that you need this money, which I'm more than happy to help, but now I'm not progressing. Now I can't reach my goals. Or, sometimes you might have to ask, what is this money for? If they ask you over and over. And if it's like a gambling issue, or if it's that, they ask someone else for money and now they have to pay them back or whatever. We have to fix those things because you can't be a crutch for somebody for the rest of your life either.
I love that. I love that, yeah. And I also have encountered a lot of Latina moms that have helped, like get their finances, pay off debt, start their retirement accounts. A lot of them want to go ahead and I've noticed a lot of them want to go ahead and start a retirement fund or account for their kids. And I'm like, wait a minute, can we just talk about you and how you're going to help yourself, put yourself up now that you're in your mid 40s or 40? Let's talk about funding your own retirement versus worrying about the 12-year-old at home or the teenager or the baby. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they do need to go ahead and concentrate on themselves. It's that analogy, right? When you're on an airplane, what did they say during the safety portion? Put your mask on first before you help anybody else. And that is so true in anything in life, I feel like. Put your mask on first before you put on anyone else's. And if you're in your 40s or, you're the mother, right? You're older than the children. They have all those years. And that generational wealth is that you're teaching them how to do it. That is much more than what a lot of us received. So don't feel bad because, you couldn't give them the down payment on the house, or you couldn't give them a full ride to school or what have you. If you just teach them how to have their money right, or even those skills, or even how to understand what a car loan looks like, there's so many steps ahead. Yeah, there's so many steps ahead compared to other kids. And you have to take care of yourself first. Looking at the whole spectrum of life, right? From birth to death, which we don't know when death is, but we would think it's after retirement, right? Like, as a mom, you're probably towards the middle there. Your kids are just beginning. Like, they still have all of that time to go ahead and invest, and that also teaches them to be a little bit of independence, right? Because now you're putting it on them, like, hey, if you want to retire early, or if you want to retire in this way, this is how you can do it. Now it's up to you if you want to do it, but don't come crying to mama when you're 30 or 40 that you don't have anything because mommy taught you.
That's awesome. I love that advice because a lot of the Latina women, it's in our culture to help our kids first. Or I feel like as a Latina, we try to help everyone else but ourselves first. Yep. It's just part of how we're raised.
Absolutely.
And how we're putting everyone else first. And and a lot of them have the tendency, they're like, well, I'm already out of debt. I have an emergency fund. I want to set my kids up. And I'm like, well, how about you? Let's just go ahead and start maxing out your Roth IRA, which is a great goal to have in 2025.
Yes.
It's a small goal. I'd like you to get even higher goals, but let's start for you. But they're like, oh, let's open for the kids. And I'm like, no, let's like you said, help yourself first before you can help others. Mm-hmm. All right, changing the topic a little bit. Many Latinas feel stuck in a job they don't love, but they're so afraid of starting something new. What mindset shifts help you push past the fear and take action?
So for this one, I think it's a lot of stability. sort of mindset. I am a true believer in like, do not jump ship until you have something else set. And this isn't any sort of job, right? If it's a job, a business, what have you. Make sure that you have something set up right before you go ahead and jump ship of the other one. I am all for finding something that you do enjoy. Like if you're in a toxic work environment, like get out because you're going to get sick and things like that. I've had to do it myself, but I was able to do it because I saved 9 months worth of living expenses.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I was at a job, this was during the pandemic, and I was at a job and I was like, I hate this job. Not so much that I hated HR, it was just the culture was very toxic. It was an international business, and this was the first time working for an Italian-owned company. American and Italian brand companies are very different, and I couldn't fit. And everyone loved me, but for whatever reason, I felt like my boss was very intimidated by me because I was more educated than he was. And I feel like he just didn't like the fact that everyone liked me, and he just didn't make that effort to make connections with people, and I did. I think people are like the most valuable resource anywhere you go. So it was during the pandemic, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're in a worldwide pandemic. I don't know what's going to happen to my health. And my mom actually had cervical cancer at the same time. And I'm like, if I need and I still need my health insurance because we don't have universal health care in this country. I'm like, I have to stick it out until I have enough money just to leave and I'm okay. So during the pandemic, before then, I actually bought my house in 2018, lived on my own for a while. I was with my now fiance at the time, and in the middle of the pandemic, I said, you know what, sweetheart? I'm like, do you want to move in with me? And we'll just ride out this worldwide pandemic together. And he's like, well, let me think about it because that's a huge step. So he did end up moving in, helped me with half of the mortgage payment, and I was able to save all the money I could because I'm an avid traveler. I loved going out, the concerts and all the things. The world was on pause, so I couldn't spend the money on all the things. And I wasn't eating out. I'd cook at home. And back then you could get a whole ton of groceries for little money, which you can't anymore. And I was still driving my car from high school, so I was like, no car payment. All I had was the mortgage, and I can go ahead and save as much money as I could. So I did, and right before the Thanksgiving holiday, I went ahead and I told my boss, I said, you know what, like, here's my resignation letter. You have 3 more weeks with me, but I'm done. Like, I'm not happy here. This job no longer serves me. He's like, where are you going? And I said, I'm not going anywhere. I said, I don't even have a job. I said, I saved up 9 months worth of living expenses. Now, mind you, this was a Latino manager. And he's like, do you know what a blessing that is? He's like, nobody can do that. And I said, it is attainable. But all of you guys here live way over your means. And as I started having conversations with everybody, they're like, come to find out, everyone was unhappy. They're like, well, I don't want to be here either, and this and that. And what that company did is that they paid you a lot of money so you could stick around. So they paid over what the market value was. But because it was such a toxic job, that's what kept you there. Because they started having that lifestyle creep. So if you were like in the office area, you were kind of like managerial, you actually had a reserved parking spot in the front. So I had a reserved parking spot. It was myself and a safety guy. We were the only ones with used cars. Everyone else had brand new cars. And not only just brand new cars, they had sports cars, BMWs, Audis, Mercedes, all the things. And here I was with a little Mitsubishi back from, what was it, 2000? And it was already like, at that time, 2020. And I'm like, I'm driving this baby till the wheels fall off because it's one less expense for me. And that sort of liberation, like for me, like that's the most badass thing I've ever done. And just having that liberation to say, this no longer serves me. Peace out. I'm out. And the fact that I was 30 years old at the time when I left. And here's all these people that were double my age. And they were at this job that they were unhappy at and they were stuck at because of the financial choices they made. And that's where I'm like, okay, like I'm going down the right path. And something that my mom always tells me is don't corner yourself. because that's essentially what they all did. They all cornered themselves. And to this day, I don't corner myself. And I think a big thing, kind of going back to your original question, is something that I say for my own business. Yes, I work a 9 to 5 and I have my business on the side, but my 9 to 5 is the angel investor to the life that I want to create for myself. I don't want to work for the rest of my life, right? I want to go ahead and be work optional. I want to go ahead and create these different streams of income. And I'm able to because I view my paycheck for my 9 to 5 as the angel investor for all the different avenues that is. For that, investing into my Roth IRA or into my brokerage account, or if it is that I'm saving money for an investment property, or if it is that I'm putting money into my business so I can go ahead and make more money, right? Or if it's, whatever it may be. You have to view your job in that way if that's a similar goal that you have as well. It's not forever. If it's a toxic job like I had, start saving your money, honey, because I remember waking up every single morning and I would throw up because I didn't want to go to work. And I'm like, this isn't normal. This isn't normal to be sick to your stomach. And because I was in human resources during the pandemic, they give you a cell phone once you end up getting in these managerial roles, and you have to be accessible 24/7, and especially during that time. So because it was a 24/7 operation, I'd get phone calls at like midnight. I'd get phone calls at like 3 a.m. I'd get phone calls at like 5 a.m. seeing if people from first shift were cleared from COVID-19. And I'm like half asleep. I'm like, well, I don't know. Here I am with my mouth guard because I grind my teeth at night. And here I am like with a list. Like, I don't know. Like, go ahead and look into the file that we uploaded last night. What are you calling me for? I'm still asleep. So, if it is something toxic, make a plan to get out, look for a job, or even if it is that you have to maybe work 2 part-time jobs somewhere, maybe a friend has a bar that you can do bartending and then you go ahead and do something on the side. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's something that, especially as Latinas, and especially with this sort of mentality that we have to be something in this society in order to be worthy of it, you don't. It's okay to go ahead and take a break or take a step back just to kind of collect yourself or to put yourself and your needs first. And, if you ever do get the opportunity to kind of say F you to a job, it is like the best feeling in the world.
I love that. Yes. I said, okay, are you okay with time or do we need to cut the interview short?
We're good.
I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask you.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Because I want to make it super inspirational.
Yes. No, you're good on time. I have nothing for the rest of the night, so you're okay.
Thank you. Okay. Adriana, so you turned a layoff into an opportunity to start Adriana Talks Dinero. What inspired you to take the leap instead of looking for another 9 to 5? You went all in into Adriana Talks Dinero and start that.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned in the very beginning, I actually negotiated my severance package. In the state of Illinois, you can actually go ahead and collect a severance package at the same time that you do unemployment.
I didn't even know this.
Yeah, so that's part of educating yourself. Meet some HR people. We know some good stuff. So essentially, the real reason why I started it is because kind of going back to my last job before that one, the toxic job that I left, that's kind of where the seed was sowed. And it just kind of hibernated for a while. And then once we got laid off, I worked for a manufacturing company here in my hometown. And the pandemic hit us hard. We're automotive parts. So I don't have to go into all of it. But basically, the chip shortage for the cars really messed us up. So they went ahead and 9 months in, they let me know that I was getting laid off. And that everyone was getting laid off. So about 80% of my workforce were people of color, immigrants, and they didn't speak the language. So I did everything I could in my power to educate them on unemployment, sort of, how you can collect severance and do unemployment at the same time. I did like on-site job fairs with other companies in the area for them to find jobs. And as I started having these conversations with these individuals, which, I respected them to pieces. They were wonderful human beings. I really enjoyed that job. So it was really heartbreaking for me to go ahead and have that realization that I worked so hard for this and really did a big impact, and yet I'm still getting laid off. That's when I said, you know what? I worked so hard for my double MBA. I worked so hard to get to this point. I believe that I'm in a good financial spot, being a homeowner by myself and, saving money, being able to leave a toxic job, understanding how interest works, how credit works, and all that stuff. I said, you know what? Let me take 6 months between the severance package, the unemployment. Let me take this sabbatical, not only to work on myself, because I went through therapy once I found out, I put myself in therapy because I had a lot of things to heal from, because I did a lot of self-blaming of myself on the layoff, and also a lot of my self-worth was tied to my job. And I said, this needs to stop. And then I ended up with a career coach that was part of my severance package as well. So negotiate everything that you can, because she was amazing through this entire journey. But nonetheless, I said, let me use my education, my skill set, and everything that I've learned thus far to really help out my community in terms of financial literacy. And even having conversations about what they can do with their 401k, I had to pump the brakes on a lot of them, because I'm just going to take it all out. I'm like, no. Do not take all that money out. Do not do that. And showing them what their options were, right? But again, they don't know what they don't know. And that's really where I took the dive with Adriana Toxinero. And I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of that healing work that I did with my therapist. It also was seeing what the need was in the community and also feeding into that need. And I wholeheartedly believe that because I had those 6 months to really hone in on the business and network and really understand what all of that looks like, that really propelled me, because I've only been in business for about 2.5 years, and every single time I talk, we call each other las comadres. So it's all Latina business owners here in Chicago, and we get together once a month. We have a chat going all the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're wonderful women. And, they always say, they're like, Adriana, it's kind of unbelievable to think that you've only been in business for 2.5 years, because you've done so much. And I always tell them it's because of that 6 month that I was really able to hone in on my business and really give it that tender love and care in the beginning. Go ahead and do a workshop here, do a boot camp there, do networking things over here. That's really what propelled me. So I'm always a huge advocate of investing in yourself, investing in your business, being that angel investor, like I said before. And, that's kind of part of it too. Start creating those sorts of streams of incomes or sources of incomes in order for you to go ahead and reach that dream life that you want to reach. Because what I've always said, and when I rebranded colors and logo wise last year, I remember working with the brand designer, and I told her, I'm like, Ruby, I don't know where I'm going to be in 2 years. And at this time, I didn't know I was going to do a podcast or anything. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be a podcast. I don't know if it's still going to be financial literacy. I don't know where it's going to go. So even working with her to really understand what can I involve into, or really the possibilities are endless. But for me, it was really giving that sort of support to my community. And at the end of the day, my goal is to educate the community and empower the community, because honestly, money is a tool, no matter how you look at it. No matter if you are a woman, if you're a man, if you're a Latina, if you're a black person, if you're white, it doesn't matter. Money is always going to be a tool, and it'll always open the door to different choices compared to someone who doesn't have it. And it's kind of getting uncomfortable, within the community to say, yeah, we're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about it, even though no one ever talked to you about it.
Yeah, no one, like I was mentioning, when I started working as a nurse, I was 21 years old. Like I just graduated college, my first big girl job,
Yes.
and I had to sign all these things like okay, what health insurance to choose, what benefit package. My mom doesn't speak English. She has
Mm-hmm.
never had a full-time job with benefits, so how is she gonna help me sign up something? Do you know what I mean? So it was like it was up
Yes.
to a 21-year-old me trying to figure out what is it that I'm doing, how much is this too little, and a lot of actually I found research. According to research, historically participation in employer-sponsored retirement plans among Latinas has always been lowered compared to other groups. Data from the National Institute of Retirement Security indicated that only 22.5%, only 22% of millennial Latinas are actually participating in 401ks or retirement plans at work. And this lower participation rate may be due to low or lack of financial education.
That's crazy. I was expecting you to say like 50%. 22?
Five Latinas are actually taking advantage of their 401k, and like I said, when I turned 21, I signed up. I'm glad my dad's like, oh, he had mentioned that like when I was in college, hey, you ever see a paper that says 401k, sign up for it. And you're at 21, you don't ever think you're going to be turning 30 or 40,
Yes.
or you're ever going to, you're just like YOLO, living YOLO. And then you're like 12 years later, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm still in the same job. And at the time, I'm glad I did opt it in, and I think it was like 3%. It wasn't much, but it's better. I was at least in the 72%, like in the 22% that did sign up for it. But there's about 80% of Latinas that don't even know what a 401k, or that they have options to invest and grow their wealth.
That's just heartbreaking because I mean, even like not even just one to invest into 401k, but if your company does like a company match, you're missing out on free money. My
Yes.
gosh.
So this is why I always like record on the podcast. I have like a beginner's investing. I was like, you can invest, like for you to start investing, you could totally do it at work and get that free money once a
Yes.
year, even if it's three
Yes.
percent. Like it's not a lot. Like when I did the calculations, I was like, oh my gosh, I only invested $1,000 that entire year as in my nursing job. Because I wasn't earning very much. So it's like 1% of like a $32,000 year job is very very little, maybe $1,000. I don't remember, but at least I got my feet wet into it. And then as
Mm-hmm.
I learned more about it and educated myself, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing for. Oh, this is for my retirement, and I understood that I cranked
Yeah.
that up to at least 10%, and then 12% is slowly, increase the contributions that I do and all that.
Yeah.
So a lot of Latinas, yeah, there's only 22% of them or like taking advantage of that free money that the benefits.
That is crazy. And it's so funny because since I am in HR, I help a lot of them because they're like, I need like a step by step. I'm like, all right, I'll go ahead and block time out on my calendar and we're going to do it step by step. You're either going to share your screen or you're going to come to my office when I'm in the office and we'll go step by step. And I'm like, 401k, you are going to apply for it. You're going to go ahead and apply for it and then you can go ahead and choose your percentage later. But you're going to put money away. And they're always like, okay, okay,
But
okay.
yeah, like no one actually teaches you that. And I did, and not even Latinas. Like I was like the only Latina in my hospital, in my department, in my entire department. So, and talking to a fellow nurse coworker, she, not as well educated. I thought, she was at least have a little bit, a leg up, or like knew a little bit more than I did back, in when we were working. But she actually told me, she's like, oh yeah, we had to take a 401k retirement loan because our house that we bought, the sewer line and the sewer was very like damaged, and we had to replace all that, and we didn't have any money. We don't have credit, they're maxed out on credit cards, so they had to take out for a 1k loan. And I was like, oh, what's that? Like I had no idea. I was 29, I was in my 20s. I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. And now that I've educated myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like the biggest mistake she ever made. But I remember
Yes.
her telling me that, and I was just like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a lot of, for the listeners who don't know what a 401k, would you like to explain it a little bit, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So a 401k loan, usually now what I see it as, it's called a hardship loan. So you have to usually prove a reason. Some of them don't. It just really depends on what financial institution your 401k is with. But you take a loan against your 401k account. So let's say that you need $10,000 to go ahead and help replace the roof. So you'll go ahead, ask for 10K. It's a whole process. that you have to work with whoever the 401k is with. The same thing as you just said, like, I don't ever recommend it. Like, when my employees come for it, I'm like, I'm not here to pry, but are you sure you can't look at another means of it? Because many times you get penalized. You have to pay it back because it's a loan. Like, you don't keep that money. You have to pay taxes on it. And it's at an interest. So there's 4 different things that are like negatively against you. And then 2, because you're taking that money out, it's no longer growing in the market. So it's like, that's number 5, right? There's 5 things against you. So I'm always like, check out your local credit union, see if there's some sort of like credit line you can take out, or, whatever it is. I said, but this is going to hit you in 5 different ways. I'm like, is it worth it? And they're like, I didn't know that. And it's just like, look at all of it. They'll even say, one person told me they didn't tell me all that. I'm like, they probably didn't tell you, but it's probably in the paperwork. And that's up to you to educate yourself on what all of that looks like. I said, so really think about it before you do it. And I feel like so many people, especially in the Latino community, just do it because, again, the instant gratification. I actually heard from a friend that one of the people at her jobs, Latino, ended up taking a loan against his K to finish paying off the house.
That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And she's just like, but now you don't have anything in your 401k. And you have to pay it back. Yeah, for retirement. And you're coming pretty close here. And he's just like, well, I just want to pay off my house. And it's just like, look at the big picture, like, take off the blinders. So it's one of those things, like, really educate yourself. Do not use retirement accounts as, your first of whatever sort of money that you need for an emergency. Go ahead and open up that high yield savings account. Put that money away. I don't care if it's $5 a week. Something's better than nothing at this point.
I agree. And yeah, I agree, because actually borrowing money against your 401k is the most expensive way for you to borrow money. Like, it's so expensive because you get hit with like you mentioned, you get hit with taxes, penalties, and you have to pay the money back. It's not like you're just getting the money and then like never having to pay it back. You're gonna pay it back. Oh yeah, just like a credit card, but with like so many fees that you have to pay up front just to get to that money. So it's just not even worth it. So, but yeah, like I said, I was working and I didn't know she was just venting, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. And then I'm like, oh my God, now I remember. It's like, I'm never doing that.
Yes.
I'm glad I haven't had to do that. But a lot of Latinas, I like to mention it in my podcast because they need to, understand what they're, So my next question is, why should more Latinas learn more about the power of investing in the stock market?
Nowadays, it is the only way to retire. Right? Like, I'm sure you probably heard it too. You need to save your money. You need to save your money. Inflation happens. Look at what happened during the pandemic, right? Everything is so much more expensive post-pandemic than it was pre-pandemic. Also, like, there is no other way to retire. You have to invest your money. And every time that I teach individuals or I do a workshop on investing, the one thing I hear over and over is, well, Adriana, that's for rich people. No, you can invest for as little as $1. It is not just for rich people. Yes, they probably gate-kept it for many years, but we have just as much right and we have just enough worth in order to invest. It's one of those things, like, educate yourself. If you don't know how, just open up your Roth IRA at a trusted financial institution such as Charles Schwab, Vanguard, or Fidelity, and put in there a little bit week by week or paycheck by paycheck and invest in the S&P 500 index fund. Yeah. You're doing so much better doing compared to not doing it at all.
Yeah, that's right. Because just saving your money, it's not gonna get you retire. It's not gonna get you that freedom that you're craving for because of inflation. So, like, investing in the stock market helps protect from inflation, so that way whenever you retire in 20 years, 10, 15, 30 years from now, you have a little nest egg there that you can just, retire. And I love that you're working towards that. You mentioned earlier in the podcast that you're working towards having a work balance, or actually a work optional. Tell us a little bit more about that. What are your plans, or how are you doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. So my goal is to be work optional by 45. I'm currently 34. So that is where I don't have to work a 9 to 5. So doing that in different ways, right? Of having different streams of income. So like my business being one, but also having different streams of income within that. So investing is a huge thing, right? Investing in a Roth IRA. Like a lot of people don't know, and this is something that I educate like my employees on and also my clientele. As much as it's super important to have a 401k, I am totally for it. But you also have to understand what your plan is as well, because what ends up happening when you do retire with a 401k is you have to pay taxes on that once you do retire, because you didn't pay taxes on it when you put in the money. Now, is it going to be lower? The hope is it will be. But I always say, how many times do you turn on the news and they're like, yay, we got a tax cut? I don't think I've ever heard that in all my life, that there's a tax cut that we have to pay into taxes. So that Roth IRA, you go ahead and pay taxes now. You have that growth tax free. So whatever money's in there that you put in is tax free when you pull it out, and whatever it grows is tax free when you pull it out. So it's making those strategic steps, right? So, within investing, I want to go ahead and invest in more properties, like the house I currently live in is a little starter home. The hope is to go ahead and buy something a little bigger with a little bit more land and rent this out. And I am keeping this baby for the rest of my life. But it's things like that, seeing how I can go ahead and create these streams of income through investing, through real estate, through my business, and anything else that I can go ahead and create for myself to go ahead and replace my income so I don't have to worry about it. And a big part of that too is living within the means of that I am not inflating my lifestyle as I make more money. That also means that I don't have any debt. So like I mentioned, I still have student loans. The goal is to go ahead and pay that off here pretty quickly. So it's things like that, to go ahead and put myself in a spot where I can go ahead and essentially not have to work if I don't want to.
I love that. That's the best position you can find yourself, especially in your 40s. That is so young. Yes. A lot of people can't retire. I'm telling you, Adriana, I work with so many nurses that were so much older than me. They were 64, 65. They were waiting. They're like, I cannot stop working. They're 60. They corner themselves, like you mentioned. And they're like, I don't know. And a lot of them would retire at 67 or 65, and then they'd come back and work part-time. And I'm like, why are you here? Oh, you know what? I just didn't put enough in retirement, or I didn't know about saving, or I didn't know about investing. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I hope, like I was always like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to leave this hospital, or cannot wait to stop working as a nurse. I can't imagine me being 67 and having to come back to work, because that's just, there's not enough money for me, to just stay at home living off Social Security.
Yes, no, and, talking about Social Security too, we don't even know if we're going to have it when we get older, right? We're still pretty young. Who knows if that's even going to be an option? And also understanding what that, if it is retirement, early retirement, or work optional life is going to look like. I'll be completely honest with you. For me, I ain't going to retire here. It's too expensive here. I'm going back to Mexico. So it's also, it's also looking at what is that going to look like for us, because my fiance is totally on board. Like when we came back this time around, he's like, baby, I want to go back to Oaxaca already. And I said, look, like we have to set ourselves up in order to go ahead and work towards that and see where we want to live. We looked at land a little bit when we were out there too, to see what our options were. So, even think of it in that aspect. Yeah. When you do retire, or when you are work optional, are you going to stay here, or are you going to go somewhere else? And what do those options look like?
I love that. I love having as many options and thinking outside of the box. A lot of people corner themselves and they're like, oh, this is it. I have to go back to work, or this is the best I could do it. Or like, oh, this broke, or now, we've gotten into debt again. Mm-hmm. A lot of 65, a lot of nurses, they were like, oh, I'm in credit card debt. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're in your 60s. Like, I hope I'm never in credit card debt in my 60s. Nothing against that. But it's like, yo, I've paid that in my 20s. Like all my 20s, I had so many money mistakes that I am scarred. In my 30s, I was like, I'm gonna turn 30 and I'm not gonna repeat these mistakes in my 30s. I'm gonna learn to invest. learn to diversify my, like, it's just my 30s are gonna look so different than my 20s because it was just like I adulted like poof, like figure it out on your own. There was no, it was just like golpetazo until, you know, it's like, whoa, I had to learn it like that. I didn't have anybody to teach me the ways.
Yeah.
So I hope this podcast helps a lot of people that are younger than us, you know, that
Yes.
can not have to go through like students and like car loans and paying off credit card loans and all that. But another question that I have for you, well, actually, one of my biggest money mistakes that I made in my 20s was just relying on one stream of income because I worked as a nurse at the bedside. I would get paid every 2 weeks, and it wasn't enough. I lived paycheck to paycheck. I relied heavily on credit card debts during my 20s without realizing that I just wasn't earning a lot. You know, I didn't have any financial education. I grew up low income with divorced parents. It was just like we grew up on, you know, government assistance, stamps. I'm pretty sure you're pretty familiar with that. I didn't know how to manage money anyway, so I made a lot of mistakes. But why? And then no one actually along the way told me that just relying on your one income stream, it was gonna be enough, you know, to survive or to put away for retirement or to do other things, you know, than just paying for your rent and mortgage or, you know, all these things. So why, so my question to you, Adriana, is like, why should a Latina focus on increasing their income and diversifying their income?
Really one of the only ways out of whatever it is that you're looking out for. If it is out of a toxic job, if it is out of the 9 to 5 grind, or even if you are in a horrible relationship or marriage, it's kind of like the only way out. It was very much a norm in the way that I grew up. I remember my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she raised us. But I always remember my dad always had his 9 to 5 and something else going on. If that was like a landscaping company, if that was snow plowing, if that was, he started getting into like real estate, like buying up houses during the recession and then renting them out. So that was kind of his way out of real estate. And I saw what sort of doors that opened for him, and it still does to this day. And so that's always been something normal. Like even with my grandparents, I saw that on both sides. My grandmother was very much the type of woman in Mexico that she would make dresses for people in town, and she would like sell like her livestock on the side. And she had her pieces of land, you know, growing alfalfa or maize or what have you. So she was also very multifaceted. So it was always just the norm growing up. And I always laugh at this because I remember being younger and I'm like, I will never be a business owner because I saw the hustle and I saw the grind that it took, and they were always go, go, go. And I'm like, I don't want that for myself. Never say never, because here I am having a 9 to 5 in a business myself. But here we are, and it's really what makes me happy, right? But I say it in the means of it gives you options, because very much like how I was laid off, I didn't know that was going to happen until I had that conversation with my boss, and she kind of laid it on me. And two, there's nothing promised in this world in terms of a job. So right now, like the market's real tough. I know a lot of people that have been unemployed for months upon months. And sometimes I always question like, well, what did you do during that time? Because you could have, you know, tutored on the side, or maybe us being bilingual, you know, taught some kids Spanish on the side or what have you, just to kind of, you know, get yourself going. But unfortunately, like in the society that we live in now and the times that we live in now, like one income is never enough. Everything's so uncertain, everything's so unknown. And I always say, like, not even in the sense of a 9 to 5, of course, with negotiating, but you have so many different special skills and knowledge and life experience that you can monetize off of, right? Like for myself, yes, I do financial literacy education because that's what I know, but I tie in the human resource part with pay negotiation, helping people understand like what is their LinkedIn supposed to look like in order to get a new job, you know, helping them with, you know, investing or retirement or even benefits. Like I even go through with clients like their benefits because they're like, I don't understand. So I have to take out my HR hat and I'm like, let's go ahead and walk through this together, and I will go ahead and explain to you in a way that you'll understand. And it's using all those sorts of skills in order to monetize, or even if you are an HR professional like myself, I kid you not, there are so many companies out there, or not so much companies, but small businesses or even nonprofits that are looking for people to make handbooks, to make policies, to create a whole onboarding process. And I'm not going to lie, I use ChatGPT for a lot of stuff. Go ahead and use AI to the best of your abilities, and you go ahead and look over it and see if it really does make sense within your expertise. There's nothing wrong with that. And the more that you kind of monetize on that, who knows, maybe you'll go ahead and nurture that and it will be its own sort of agency, or it'll be its own sort of business. So when things do get tough at a job, or you're just not happy there, you're like, hey, I already have people that know me by doing this. Let me go ahead and see if they need help. And you have that as income to either whatever goal you have, to pay off debt, to buy a house, or to save money, or to invest, or retire. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you have your different ways to make money at the end of the day.
I love that. I love that advice because I feel like it's not taught in school or in college. It's like you're taught to be this, an accountant, and that's what you're going to be until the day you die. Or you're going to be a nurse, and that's how you're going to be. They don't encourage you to become entrepreneurial or try different things, or just sort of I feel like it was the mentality of our parents growing up. It's like, oh, you're just known for what you do, and then you do that, and that's it. You're not allowed to change your mind or explore this or explore that, because they also grew up in a different environment where it's you didn't have a choice but to love your job and stay there forever and ever and ever,
Yes.
But nowadays, there's no benefit for staying loyal to a job. There's no retirement. You have to fund your own retirement. I feel like a lot of Latinas no saben they don't realize this, but you're your own best advocate. You have to start thinking about it. Okay, if I stop working tomorrow and the money comes into a stop, what happens then? Where's the money going to come from? Oh, I have this side hustle that I've worked for a year, or I have so-and-so that I know that she was going to get me in, or you know what I mean? So these are the things that, we're so replaceable. That was something that I learned quickly in my 20s. I don't know, in college, they're like, you're going to be irreplaceable. You can only learn, you're the very few chosen and this and that. And it's as soon as you start working in corporate or you get out there in the job, you're like, wow, you realize how replaceable you are. You're like, oh my gosh, it's just something, that you can keep in the back. No one is loyal to you. A lot of people stay loyal to a company, loyal. And what for? They're not going to fund your retirement. If they fire you tomorrow, that's it, it doesn't pay anything. Maybe in our parents' time frame, they would have, retirement or different things or seniority. There's none of that.
No. And that's why, I'm always so astonished when I talk to people. They're like, yeah, I've been in the same company for 35 years. I'm like, okay. And they're proud of it. And I'm just hey. If you say, you've ran your business for 35 years, I'm like, oh, wow, right? But if they're like, yeah, I've been here for 35 years, uncomfortable. Get uncomfortable with yourself and learn other industries or other jobs and things like that.
Don't be afraid of getting off your lane, just because you study this, it's oh my gosh, I must be in this. And, you just switch off and get you closer. You have to first figure out where is it that you want to be in life.
Exactly.
Are you going to be working for the next 40 years? I figured that quickly. I was like, I'm not going to be here in the next 40 years. So I started planning. I would go on Google and I was like, how can I retire? How can I retire tomorrow? I was obsessed because I was 28, 29 and I was like, oh my God, I have student loans. I have debt. I have credit card debt. This is what led me to financial freedom journey. I was like, I just cannot be doing this for 40 years. This would drive me nuts.
No, I get you.
He's like, tú trabajas hasta que te mate y...
I know. No, and I think that's such a disservice to ourselves, right? We have such a beautiful culture and we have our community and things like that, and not to live present in it and whatever that looks like for you. I just think that's such a disservice.
Thank you so much, Adriana, for your time today. I love the conversation. Welcome. You're so inspirational. I cannot wait to share this podcast to everybody. Where can everybody find you? Where can our listeners find you, and how can they learn from you or work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am at Adriana Toxinero across all social media. I'm most active on Instagram. I'm on TikTok and Facebook and Threads. My website is adrianatoxinero.com. You can go ahead and find any sort of events that are coming up on there. You can subscribe to my newsletter, which you will go ahead and get like first dibs on things, first announcement on things. And I also put scholarships and business grants in there too. So that's a really good resource for any of you that are looking for that. And you can go ahead and find out how to work with me. I do have a few spaces open for one-on-one coaching. And then I will also have a few workshops available virtually and in person throughout the year. So you can go ahead and find that on there as well. I also have my own podcast, which is the Adriana Toxinato podcast, which I actually speak about financial literacy topics. And week 1 is in English and week 2 is in Spanish. So I actually did that intentionally because I don't know about you, Rachel, but sometimes I tell my dad things. I'm like, Papi, this sort of topic on financial literacy. Like, let's say I was just talking about him about high yield savings accounts, and he didn't listen to me. And then he talked to someone else, and someone else told him about it. He's like, Mika, there's this savings account where I can get like 4.5% interest. I said, is it called a high yield savings account? Yeah. I'm like, yes, we had this conversation 2 years ago, but go on. So I have learned, and this isn't just a me problem, this is an everybody problem. Decimos algo a nuestros papás and they don't listen and they have to hear it from somebody else. Let me be that person to tell mommy and papi something that you've been telling them for the past 5 years. But essentially it's just really like our community as a whole needs to learn these things. So I'm going to put in English and Spanish, and very intentional in the way that I do the Spanish one because I know a lot of our immigrant counterparts within the community didn't have the opportunity like we did to have education. So everything is in a 5th to 6th grade level where they can understand that, and I don't put in those big words and things like that. So I'm very intentional and empathetic when it comes to that. So that's a wonderful project that I've been working on as well.
I love that. I love it because a lot more people, there's a lot of inmigrantes that are coming out in their 20s, like mi amiga, she's 28. No habla inglés. She's going to the community, Hispanic community downtown to learn the classes in English, and it's hard, and they work full time in la fábrica, and it's just hard. So I'm so glad that you have that podcast in Spanish, so they can learn these terms. I try to explain it. I'm like, but that is awesome. I'm so glad you're educating a lot of the Latinas in the community that need your help. So thank you for all you do, Adriana.
Thank you.